I'm David, and today I'll tell you an incredible story about how I saved my fiancée Charlotte Greene from a devastating car accident, breaking both my legs in the process, only to discover she was secretly planning to leave me for a wealthy businessman the moment I became disabled. While I was fighting through painful rehabilitation, learning to walk again, she was already moving into luxury penthouses and attending high society galas with her new lover. She told everyone I was too broken to be the man she deserved. But what Charlotte didn't know was that I had been hiding my true identity all along. I wasn't just some ordinary guy, I was the heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire, and I had chosen to live humbly to find genuine love. After her ultimate betrayal, I decided it was time to reclaim my throne and show her exactly what she had thrown away. This is the story of how love, betrayal, and hidden wealth changed everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 years ago, I was living what I thought was the perfect life in the bustling city of Millbrook Heights. My name is Julian Finch, and back then, I was just another guy working as a freelance graphic designer, living in a modest downtown apartment. I had deliberately chosen this simple life, working from coffee shops and small offices, earning just enough to get by. What nobody knew, not even my fiancée Charlotte Greene, was that this humble lifestyle was entirely by choice. Charlotte was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. She worked as an event coordinator for Grandstone Entertainment, one of the city's most prestigious event planning companies. She was ambitious, beautiful, and had this infectious energy that could light up any room. We met at a local art gallery opening 2 years prior, where she was managing the event, and I was there admiring the work. She approached me, confident and charming, asking about my thoughts on the contemporary pieces. That conversation lasted hours, and I knew I was completely smitten. When I proposed to her 6 months before the accident, she said yes without hesitation. We had been planning our wedding for the following spring, talking about our future together, our dreams, our goals. Charlotte often mentioned wanting to upgrade our lifestyle, move to the affluent Westbridge district, join the exclusive Pinnacle Country Club, travel to exotic destinations. I would smile and nod, telling her that with hard work and time, we'd get there. She seemed content with that answer, though I occasionally caught glimpses of impatience in her eyes. Our relationship had its perfect moments. Charlotte would bring me coffee during my late-night design sessions, and I'd surprise her with thoughtful gifts. Nothing expensive, but meaningful. She'd show me off to her colleagues, introducing me as her creative genius fiancé. I loved how proud she seemed to be of me, even though I was earning a fraction of what her friends' partners made. The accident happened on a cold February evening. We were driving back from dinner at Romano's Bistro, a cozy Italian place we frequented in the Elmwood district. Charlotte was telling me about a high-profile corporate gala she was organizing for Blackstone Industries, one of the city's largest tech companies. She was excited about the opportunity, saying it could be her big break into managing events for Fortune 500 companies. "Julian, imagine if this goes well," she said, her eyes sparkling, as she gestured enthusiastically while driving. "I could finally get that promotion to senior coordinator. We could start looking at those condos in Westbridge I showed you." I was smiling, listening to her dreams, when I saw the 18-wheeler truck running the red light at the intersection ahead. The driver was clearly distracted, texting while driving, and was barreling straight toward Charlotte's side of the car. Time seemed to slow down, as I realized what was about to happen. Without thinking, I grabbed the steering wheel and yanked it hard to the right, throwing my entire body weight to shield Charlotte from the impact. The truck slammed into my side of the car, with devastating force. I remember the sound of crushing metal, the sensation of my legs being pinned and crushed under the twisted dashboard, and Charlotte's terrified screaming before everything went black. I woke up 3 days later in Millbrook General Hospital. The first thing I saw was Charlotte's face, tear-stained and exhausted, sitting beside my bed. The first thing I felt was absolutely nothing below my waist. The doctors explained that both of my legs had been severely fractured in multiple places. I had undergone 2 emergency surgeries, with metal rods and pins holding my bones together. The prognosis was uncertain. They said I might walk again, with extensive rehabilitation, but it would take months, possibly years, and I might never fully recover. "You saved my life," Charlotte whispered, holding my hand tightly. The doctors said, If you hadn't turned the wheel when you did, the truck would have hit me directly. I don't know what I would have done if I had lost you." During those first weeks in the hospital, Charlotte was my anchor. She stayed by my bedside for hours, helping me with basic tasks, bringing me books and magazines, updating me on her work. She handled all the insurance paperwork, coordinated with the doctors, and even started researching the best physical therapy facilities in the area. Her dedication was unwavering, and I fell even deeper in love with this woman, who was willing to stand by me during my darkest hour. The physical therapy was grueling. Learning to sit up properly, then to support my own weight, then to take my first tentative steps with a walker. Charlotte attended many of my sessions, cheering me on through every small victory. When I managed to take 5 steps unassisted for the first time, she cried tears of joy, and said she couldn't wait to dance with me at our wedding. We postponed our spring wedding, naturally, but Charlotte assured me that she didn't care about timing. "I just want you to be healthy," she said. "We have our whole lives ahead of us." I believed her completely. This woman had stuck by me through the worst thing that had ever happened to me. She had seen me at my most vulnerable, most dependent, and she hadn't flinched. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to notice subtle changes that I initially dismissed as stress and exhaustion from caring for me. 4 months into my recovery, Charlotte's behavior began to shift in ways that made my stomach churn with unease. At first I told myself it was natural. She was under tremendous stress, essentially caring for a disabled fiancé, while trying to maintain her demanding career. But the changes were becoming impossible to ignore. The first red flag was her sudden obsession with her appearance and social status. Charlotte had always been well-dressed and professional, but now she was spending hours getting ready for work, buying expensive clothes that I knew her salary couldn't cover. When I asked about a designer handbag I'd never seen before, she brushed it off, saying it was a work investment that she'd put on her credit card. "Image is everything in the event planning business," she explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "I need to look successful to attract successful clients." Her work schedule became increasingly erratic. She'd leave early in the morning and return late at night, claiming she was networking at industry events or meeting with potential clients. Weekends that used to be our time together were now filled with mandatory corporate functions that she insisted I couldn't attend because they involved too much standing and walking. "You're still recovering, Julian," she'd say, with false concern. "These events are too demanding for someone with your limitations. I don't want you to overexert yourself." The way she said limitations made my blood run cold. There was a hint of disdain in her voice that she quickly masked with worry, but I caught it. I started to feel like my disability was becoming an embarrassment to her rather than something we were overcoming together. Charlotte's phone behavior changed dramatically. She who used to share everything with me, showing me funny messages from friends or interesting emails from clients, now guarded her phone like a state secret. She'd step out of the room to take calls, claiming they were confidential work matters. When her phone buzzed during our rare dinners together, she'd glance at it nervously, and sometimes excuse herself to respond to urgent messages. One evening, I decided to surprise her by cooking dinner, something I'd finally become capable of doing, while using my mobility aids. I made her favorite pasta dish from scratch, set up candles, and waited for her to come home. She arrived 2 hours later than expected, her lipstick perfect, but her hair slightly disheveled, smelling faintly of expensive cologne that I knew wasn't mine. "Oh, Julian," she said, looking genuinely surprised and slightly guilty. "I didn't know you were planning this. I already ate at the client dinner I told you about." But I distinctly remembered her saying she had a morning meeting, not a dinner. When I gently pointed this out, she became defensive and irritated. "I can't be expected to give you a minute-by-minute itinerary of my day," she snapped. "I'm working twice as hard now to support both of us while you recover. The least you could do is be understanding instead of clingy." Clingy. The word hit me like a physical blow. The man who had literally broken his legs saving her life was now being called clingy for wanting to spend time with his fiancée. Her friends' attitudes toward me began to shift as well. Charlotte's social circle consisted mainly of other ambitious professionals in Millbrook Heights business district. Before the accident, they'd been friendly and inclusive, inviting both of us to their gatherings. Now when I encountered them at the grocery store or coffee shops, their conversations became awkward and brief. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I overheard a particularly painful conversation outside Meridian Cafe one afternoon. I was struggling to maneuver my wheelchair through the door when I heard Charlotte's friend Stephanie talking to another woman. "I feel so bad for Charlotte," Stephanie was saying. "She's trapped, you know. She can't very well dump him after he became disabled, saving her life. It would look terrible, but honestly, what kind of future does she have with someone who might never fully walk again?" The other woman made sympathetic noises. "She's so young and beautiful. She could have anyone. It's such a tragedy." I sat frozen in my wheelchair, processing what I'd heard. Was that how people saw us? Was Charlotte staying with me out of obligation and guilt rather than love? That night, I tried to discuss my concerns with Charlotte. I chose my words carefully, expressing that I felt distant from her lately, and asking if there was anything we could do to reconnect. Her response chilled me to the bone. "Julian, you have to understand that this isn't easy for me either," she said, not quite able to look me in the eye. "I never planned for this. When I agreed to marry you, I thought we'd have a normal life together. This situation is complicated. Complicated," I repeated, feeling my heart sink. "I'm still the same person, Charlotte. I still love you the same way. Yes, I'm dealing with physical challenges, but we're supposed to face those together." She sighed heavily, as if my very existence was exhausting her. "I know you think it's that simple, but you don't understand the pressure I'm under. People look at me differently now. They either pity me for being stuck with you, or they think I'm some kind of saint for staying. Neither feels good." Her words revealed everything I'd been trying not to see. She wasn't staying because she loved me. She was staying because leaving would damage her image. The woman I'd almost died to protect was now viewing our relationship as a burden to her social status. The final straw came during a physical therapy session. I'd been making excellent progress, and was excited to share my improvements with Charlotte. The therapist said I'd likely be walking without assistance within the next month. I called Charlotte immediately to share the good news, but the phone went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later, same result. When she finally returned my call that evening, she sounded distracted and uninterested. "That's great, Julian," she said flatly. "I'm sure you're very happy about that." No excitement, no celebration, no pride in my progress, just indifference. It was becoming clear that my recovery wasn't something she was hoping for. It was something she was tolerating. I began to suspect that Charlotte was planning her exit strategy, just waiting for the right moment to leave, without looking like the villain. The question was, what was she waiting for? And more importantly, what was she doing in the meantime? I was about to find out, and the truth would shatter everything I thought I knew about the woman I'd nearly died to save. The truth came crashing down on a rainy Thursday evening in late September, exactly 7 months after the accident that changed everything. I had been making remarkable progress in my recovery, walking short distances without assistance and regaining most of my strength. My physical therapist, Dr. Amanda Rivers, had even suggested I might be ready to return to normal activities within a few weeks. I decided to surprise Charlotte at the Grandstone Entertainment offices with the good news, and take her out to celebrate. I'd been planning this surprise for days, coordinating with her. I even bought a small bouquet of white roses, her favorites from the flower shop on Maple Street. The Grandstone building was a sleek glass tower in Millbrook Heights Financial District. The Grandstone building was a sleek glass tower in Millbrook Heights Financial District. I'd visited Charlotte there several times before the accident, and the security staff knew me well. Mark, the evening security guard, greeted me warmly as I made my way to the elevator. "Good to see you back on your feet, Julian," he said with genuine warmth. "Charlotte must be so proud of your recovery. If only he knew the truth." I took the elevator to the 15th floor, where Charlotte's department was located. The office was mostly empty at 7 p.m., with just a few dedicated employees working late. I walked down the familiar hallway toward Charlotte's corner office, my steps steady and confident, a far cry from the broken man I'd been just months ago. As I approached her office, I heard voices, Charlotte's laugh, bright and carefree, in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in months, followed by a deep male voice I didn't recognize. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, I could see Charlotte sitting on her desk, her legs dangling playfully, while a tall, impeccably dressed man in an expensive suit stood between them, his hands resting on her thighs. My heart stopped. "You're terrible, Vincent," Charlotte was saying, her voice sultry and flirtatious. "What if someone sees us, Vincent?" The name hit me like a freight train. Vincent Blackstone, the CEO of Blackstone Industries, the Fortune 500 company Charlotte had been coordinating events for. I'd heard her mention him frequently over the past few months, always in professional terms, always emphasizing how important this client relationship was for her career. "Let them see," the man replied, his voice smooth and confident. "I own half the companies in this building anyway. Besides, you'll be Mrs. Vincent Blackstone soon enough. Then no one will dare question anything you do." Mrs. Vincent Blackstone. The flowers slipped from my trembling hands, hitting the floor with a soft thud. Charlotte giggled, actually giggled, like a schoolgirl with a crush. "You're so impatient. I told you I need to handle Julian carefully. The timing has to be perfect. How much longer do I have to wait?" Vincent's voice carried a note of frustration. "It's been months since you agreed to leave him. I've already bought the penthouse, planned our engagement party, even picked out the ring. My patience isn't infinite, Charlotte." I know," Charlotte soothed, running her fingers along his tie. "But think about the optics. Julian saved my life, and became disabled in the process. If I leave him too soon, I'll look heartless. People will talk, and that won't be good for either of our reputations." My legs, the legs I'd broken saving her life, nearly gave out beneath me. I had to grip the doorframe to stay upright, as her words sank in. She wasn't staying out of love, or even obligation. She was staying to manage her public image, while planning her escape to a richer man. "Besides," Charlotte continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, "he's been making progress with his walking. Once he's fully recovered, I can claim that I stayed until he was back on his feet, then realized we just grew apart. It'll look noble, rather than cruel." Vincent laughed, a cold sound that made my skin crawl. "You're brilliantly calculating, darling. That's why I fell for you. Poor bastard probably still thinks you love him." "He's so naive," Charlotte said, shaking her head with what sounded like amusement. "He actually believes all those times I said I was working late or attending networking events. Julian trusts me completely. It would be sweet if it weren't so pathetic." The words hit me like physical blows. Every late night, every canceled plan, every work emergency had been a lie. While I was fighting to walk again, believing I was getting better for our future together, she was building a new life with another man. "The accident was almost a blessing in disguise," Charlotte continued, and I felt bile rise in my throat. "It gave me time to really evaluate what I wanted. Julian's a good man, but he's ordinary. He was never going to give me the life I deserve." "You can." Vincent pulled her closer, and I watched in horror as he kissed her. Deep, passionate, the way she used to kiss me. The way she hadn't kissed me since before the accident. "Once we're married, you'll have everything you've ever wanted," Vincent murmured against her lips. "The penthouse in Westbridge, the house in the Hamptons, unlimited shopping, first-class travel to anywhere in the world. You'll never have to worry about money or status again." "I can hardly wait," Charlotte breathed. "I'm so tired of pretending to be happy with Julian's little apartment, and his modest lifestyle. Do you know he actually suggested we honeymoon at some cabin in the mountains." "A cabin?" I nearly laughed in his face. That cabin was something I'd suggested because I thought it would be romantic and intimate, just the two of us, away from the pressures of daily life. I'd saved money for months to afford even that modest getaway. Now I realized she'd been silently mocking my efforts all along. I couldn't take any more. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing, and I felt like I was going to be sick. I turned to leave as quietly as possible, but my foot caught on the flowers I'd dropped, sending them skittering across the floor. The voices in the office stopped abruptly. "What was that?" Vincent asked sharply. "Probably just the cleaning crew," Charlotte replied, but I could hear uncertainty in her voice. I tried to move quickly, but my legs, still not completely reliable, betrayed me. I stumbled slightly, steadying myself against the wall with a soft thump. Footsteps approached the door. Charlotte appeared in the doorway, and her face went completely white when she saw me standing there. For a moment, we just stared at each other, her mouth open in shock, me struggling to process the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about our relationship. "Julian," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "How long have you been?" "Long enough," I managed to say, surprised by how steady my voice sounded despite the chaos in my chest. Vincent appeared behind her, his expensive suit and confident posture, a stark contrast to my casual clothes and still recovering frame. He looked me up and down dismissively, as if I were some minor inconvenience. "So this is the famous Julian," he said with a smirk. "Charlotte's told me so much about you." The casual cruelty in his voice, the fact that I'd been a topic of discussion between them, probably a source of amusement, was almost more than I could bear. "How long?" I asked Charlotte, my voice stronger now, fueled by growing anger. "How long has this been going on?" Charlotte's face cycled through emotions: shock, guilt, fear, and finally, something like relief, as if she was tired of pretending. "Julian, this isn't what it looks like," she began. But Vincent laughed. "Oh, come on, Charlotte. He heard everything. Don't insult his intelligence." Vincent stepped forward, his expression smug and victorious. "Yes, Julian, Charlotte and I have been together for 4 months. She's leaving you for me. Surely you can understand why." 4 months. Just 1 month after my accident, while I was still learning to sit up properly in a hospital bed, she had already moved on to another man. "You've been lying to me this entire time," I said to Charlotte, still struggling to believe what I was hearing. "While I was fighting to recover, believing we had a future together, you were planning to leave me for him." Charlotte's mask finally slipped completely. Gone was any pretense of the caring, devoted fiancé she'd been pretending to be. "Julian, be realistic," she said, her voice taking on a cold, practical tone I'd never heard before. "Look at yourself. Look at him. I'm 28 years old, beautiful, and ambitious. Did you really think I was going to spend my life taking care of a disabled man who makes $30,000 a year, designing flyers for local businesses?" The words hit me like a slap across the face. Every insecurity I'd felt during my recovery, every doubt about whether I was enough for her, had been justified. "I saved your life," I said quietly, the statement hanging in the air between us. "And I stayed with you for 7 months because of it," Charlotte shot back. "I think that makes us even, don't you? I could have left while you were still in the hospital, but I didn't. I gave you time to recover. Now it's time for me to move on with my life." Vincent put his arm around Charlotte's waist possessively. "Don't feel too bad, Julian. Charlotte needs a man who can provide for her properly. Someone with real success, real power, real money. I'm sure you understand." I looked at Charlotte one last time, searching for any trace of the woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman I'd nearly died to protect. But she was gone, replaced by this cold stranger, who saw my love as a burden, and my sacrifice as a debt that had been paid. "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice calm, despite the storm raging inside me. What neither of them understood was that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. But that revelation would have to wait. First, I needed to process the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about love, loyalty, and the woman I'd been prepared to spend my life with. I turned and walked away, my steps steady and strong, the recovery they'd been waiting for, so they could dispose of me with a clear conscience finally complete. The drive home from Grandstone Entertainment was a blur of rage, heartbreak, and bitter clarity. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white as I navigated the familiar streets of Millbrook Heights, seeing everything through new eyes. Every corner we'd walked together, every restaurant where we'd shared what I thought were loving moments, every place that held memories of our relationship now felt tainted with lies. When I reached our apartment, the modest 2-bedroom place Charlotte had been secretly ashamed of, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to compose myself. The woman inside wasn't the person I'd fallen in love with. She wasn't even the person I thought I'd been living with for the past 7 months. I needed to know the full extent of her deception before I decided what to do next. I entered our apartment, with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since before the accident. Charlotte wouldn't be home for hours. She was probably still with Vincent, celebrating what they thought was their secret being successfully maintained. I had time to investigate, and I intended to use every minute of it. I started with Charlotte's home office, a small room she'd claimed was necessary for managing client communications and event planning. I'd always respected her privacy, never questioning why she kept it locked, or why she was so secretive about her work documents. Now I understood why. Her laptop was password protected, but I knew Charlotte well enough to guess her passwords. After a few attempts, I tried Vincent B 2024, and it worked. My stomach lurched as the implications hit me. She'd been so confident in her deception that she'd made her secret lover's name her password. What I found in her email and text message history made my discovery at the office seem like just the tip of the iceberg. The first email thread I found was dated just 3 weeks after my accident, when I was still in intensive care. Charlotte had already been researching Vincent Blackstone, studying his business interests, his social circle, his previous relationships. She'd methodically planned her approach to him, using her professional role as event coordinator for his company as the perfect cover story. Vincent is newly divorced and rumored to be looking for someone sophisticated to accompany him to high society events. She'd written to her friend Jessica, "This could be the opportunity I've been waiting for. Julian's accident might actually work in my favor. Vincent has a thing for women with compelling personal stories. The devoted fiancée caring for her disabled hero will be very appealing to someone who values loyalty." The calculating coldness of her words made me feel physically sick. My accident, my pain, my struggle to recovery, it had all been part of her strategy to attract another man. I found detailed notes about Vincent's preferences, his favorite restaurants, his hobbies, even his ex-wife's characteristics, so Charlotte could position herself as the perfect opposite. She'd studied him like a research project, molding herself into exactly what he wanted while I was fighting to regain the use of my legs. The timeline of their relationship was even more devastating than I'd imagined. Their first accidental meeting had been carefully orchestrated. Charlotte had arranged to be working late on the night Vincent typically stayed after hours, ensuring they'd encounter each other in the building's lobby. She dressed specifically for the occasion, wearing what her notes described as approachable but elegant, show interest without seeming desperate. Their first dinner had occurred just 6 weeks after my accident. While I was still doing basic physical therapy exercises, and believing Charlotte when she said she was networking for new clients, she was already pursuing Vincent romantically. The restaurant receipts hidden in her desk drawer told the story. Chateau Marmont, the most expensive French restaurant in Millbrook Heights financial district, followed by evenings at exclusive wine bars and private clubs I'd never heard of. But the financial deception went even deeper than emotional betrayal. I discovered that Charlotte had been using my accident and disability to manipulate money from multiple sources. She'd started a GoFundMe page that I knew nothing about, raising over $15,000 from friends, family, and even strangers who were moved by our story. The description painted her as the devoted fiancée sacrificing everything to care for her disabled hero. "Julian saved my life, and lost the use of his legs protecting me," the page read. "While he undergoes extensive rehabilitation, I'm working extra hours and cutting every expense to support his medical care and our basic needs. Any support would mean the world to us during this difficult time." None of that money had gone toward my medical care or our living expenses. Instead, I found receipts showing Charlotte had used it to buy designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and even a weekend getaway to the luxury resort at Pinehurst Springs. A trip she'd told me was a work retreat she had to attend alone. She'd also applied for and received disability assistance benefits on my behalf, forging my signature on documents, and having the payments directed to an account I didn't know existed. While I was gratefully accepting what I thought was her financial support during my recovery, she was actually stealing money meant for my care, and using it to fund her new lifestyle with Vincent. The most painful discovery was a series of text messages between Charlotte and Vincent from just 2 weeks ago. Around the time I'd achieved my biggest recovery milestone,
walking unassisted for a full day.
Julian reached another recovery goal today. Charlotte had texted Vincent. Doctor says he'll be completely mobile within a month. Time to start planning my exit strategy. Vincent's response was chilling. Perfect timing. I've already had my lawyers draw up the prenup. Once you're free from the invalid, we can announce our engagement. I've booked the Grandview Ballroom for our engagement party. 3 weeks from Saturday. Invalid. They were planning their engagement party while I was celebrating my ability to walk again, and Vincent referred to me as the invalid. I found the actual invitation in Charlotte's email drafts, an elegant design featuring their names in gold calligraphy, scheduled for exactly 1 week after Charlotte planned to break up with me. The guest list included Millbrook Heights' most influential business leaders, politicians, and social elite. Charlotte had already ordered her engagement dress, a $3,000 designer gown she'd charged to the credit card funded by the GoFundMe donations. But perhaps the most devastating evidence was a voice recording I found on Charlotte's phone, a conversation between her and Vincent, from the previous week, apparently recorded accidentally when Charlotte's phone activated, while in her purse. I almost feel bad for him sometimes, Charlotte's voice said clearly. Julian really believes I love him. He keeps talking about our future together, making plans for when he's fully recovered. It would be sweet if it weren't so delusional. Vincent's laughter was audible in the background. The man threw away his legs for you and you're calling him delusional for believing you'd stay with him. That's cold even for you, darling. What was I supposed to do? Charlotte replied defensively. Let him die in the car crash. That would have been inconvenient too. At least this way, I got credit for being the devoted girlfriend, which opened doors I never could have accessed otherwise. Your social circle loves a woman with a compelling backstory. True, Vincent agreed. Though I have to admit, I'm looking forward to not having to sneak around anymore. Having a secret relationship loses its appeal when your girlfriend has to go home every night to play nursemaid to a cripple. Cripple. The casual cruelty of that word, spoken about me by the two people who had stolen my trust, my money, and my future, finally broke something inside me. I sat in Charlotte's office, surrounded by evidence of the most comprehensive betrayal I could have imagined, and felt something shift inside me. The heartbreak was still there, but it was being joined by something else. A cold, calculating anger that reminded me of skills and instincts I'd kept buried for years. Charlotte and Vincent thought they were so clever, so sophisticated, so far above me in every way that mattered. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. It was time for them to find out. But first I had a phone call to make, one that would change everything and give me the power to ensure that Charlotte and Vincent got exactly what they deserved. The phone call I needed to make would change everything, but it also meant revealing a secret I'd kept hidden for over 3 years. I sat in my modest apartment, surrounded by evidence of Charlotte's betrayal, and dialed a number I hadn't called since I'd left my old life behind. Finch Industries, Executive Office, came the crisp professional voice of Margaret, my grandfather's longtime assistant. Margaret, it's Julian, I said quietly. There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. Mr. Julian, oh my goodness, it's really you. Your grandfather has been. We've all been hoping you'd call. Are you all right? Are you safe? I'm fine, Margaret. I need to speak with him immediately. Tell him it's time to come home. Within minutes, I heard the familiar voice that had guided me through my childhood and teenage years, stern but loving, powerful but protective. Julian. My grandfather's voice was thick with emotion. My boy, where have you been? We've respected your wishes for space, but 3 years without a word. I know, grandfather, I'm sorry, but I need you to know that I'm ready to reclaim my place in the family. And I need your help to deal with some people who made a very serious mistake. What Charlotte and Vincent didn't know, what nobody in Millbrook Heights knew, was that Julian Finch was actually Julian Finch Morrison, heir to the Morrison-Finch conglomerate, one of the largest private business empires in the country. My family owned everything from luxury hotels and resorts, to tech companies, real estate developments, and media outlets. The Morrison-Finch name commanded respect and fear in equal measure across multiple industries. I had left that world 3 years ago, after a bitter argument with my father about the direction of the company and my role in it. I'd wanted to prove I could make it on my own, without the family name or money. I'd legally changed my documents to just Julian Finch, moved to Millbrook Heights under the radar, and built a deliberately modest life as a freelance graphic designer. The irony was devastating. Charlotte had left me for Vincent Blackstone, thinking she was trading up from a poor, disabled man to a wealthy, powerful one. She had no idea that Blackstone Industries, Vincent's entire empire, was actually a subsidiary of Morrison Finch Holdings. Vincent Blackstone, the man she thought was so much better than me, was essentially my employee. Grandfather, I continued, my voice steady despite the magnitude of what I was about to set in motion, I need you to arrange an emergency board meeting at Blackstone Industries tomorrow morning, and I need our legal team to prepare fraud charges against their event coordinator, Charlotte Greene, and to begin proceedings to remove Vincent Blackstone as CEO. Julian, what's happened? Are you in some kind of trouble? I spent the next 20 minutes explaining everything: the accident, Charlotte's betrayal, the financial fraud, Vincent's involvement, and how they'd both manipulated and mocked my disability while stealing money meant for my medical care. When I finished, the silence on the other end of the line was more terrifying than any shouting could have been. My grandfather's voice, when he finally spoke, was ice cold. They committed fraud against my grandson while he was recovering from injuries sustained saving that woman's life. Yes, sir. And this Vincent Blackstone character referred to you as a cripple and an invalid multiple times according to the recordings I found. Another pause. Then Julian, I want you to pack a bag and come home tonight. Tomorrow morning, we're going to remind these people exactly who they've been fooling with. I'll have the jet ready in 2 hours. The Morrison Finch family estate was located in the exclusive Thornfield Hills district, about an hour outside Millbrook Heights. I hadn't been there in 3 years, but as the car wound up the familiar tree-lined driveway toward the sprawling mansion, I felt a sense of power and belonging I'd forgotten existed. My grandfather, William Morrison Finch, was waiting for me on the front steps. At 78, he was still an imposing figure, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that commanded boardrooms and bent entire industries to his will. When he embraced me, I felt like I was stepping back into armor I'd discarded long ago. "You look good, boy," he said, studying my face and my steady gait. "Stronger than when you left, despite what you've been through. That steel in your spine, that's Morrison blood." That evening, over dinner in the grand dining room I'd grown up in, my grandfather briefed me on everything I'd missed during my 3-year absence. Morrison Finch Holdings had expanded significantly, acquiring dozens of smaller companies, including Blackstone Industries, which they'd purchased 18 months ago, when Vincent had overextended himself financially. Vincent Blackstone has been a problematic CEO from the start, my grandfather explained, cutting into his steak with precise movements. Arrogant, wasteful, prone to making decisions based on ego, rather than business sense. We've been looking for a reason to replace him. He's just handed us several. The legal team worked through the night, and by morning, they had prepared a comprehensive case. Charlotte's fraud was extensive enough to warrant criminal charges, and Vincent's mismanagement of company resources, including using company funds to pay for his personal entertainment while courting Charlotte, violated multiple clauses in his employment contract. At 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into the Blackstone Industries boardroom, wearing a custom-tailored charcoal suit, flanked by 3 of the most feared corporate lawyers in the country. Vincent was already there, looking confident and relaxed as he chatted with his management team. Charlotte sat beside him, dressed in one of the expensive outfits she'd bought with stolen money, playing the role of the supportive soon-to-be fiancé. The moment I entered the room, the conversation stopped. Vincent looked confused, then annoyed. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, rising from his chair. "Security, there's been some kind of mistake. This man doesn't belong here." I took my seat at the head of the table, the chair reserved for the company's primary shareholder, and smiled calmly at the room full of shocked faces. "Please, sit down, Vincent," I said quietly. "We have a lot to discuss." Charlotte's face had gone completely white. She was staring at me as if I were a ghost, clearly trying to process what was happening. "I don't know who you think you are," Vincent began, his voice rising. "But you can't just walk into my boardroom, and actually," interrupted David Chen, the lead attorney who'd accompanied me. "Mr. Finch can absolutely do that. Allow me to introduce Julian Finch Morrison, majority shareholder, and heir to Morrison Finch Holdings, which owns 67% of Blackstone Industries. The silence in the room was deafening. Vincent's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning horror, as the implications became clear. "That's impossible," Charlotte whispered, her voice barely audible. "Julian is a graphic designer. He lives in a tiny apartment. He doesn't have any money." "I chose to live modestly," I replied, keeping my voice calm and professional. "I wanted to build relationships based on who I was as a person, not what my family could provide. Unfortunately, that experiment taught me some valuable lessons about human nature." Vincent had sunk back into his chair, his confidence completely evaporated. You're Julian Morrison, the Morrison Finch heir who disappeared 3 years ago." "I didn't disappear," I corrected. "I chose to live independently, but recent events have made me reconsider that decision." I nodded to David, who opened his briefcase and began distributing documents around the table. "These are the findings of our investigation into financial fraud committed against Mr. Morrison by Charlotte Greene, as well as documentation of policy violations and misuse of company resources by Vincent Blackstone. Miss Greene, you're being charged with identity theft, fraud, and theft of funds designated for disability assistance. Mr. Blackstone, you're being terminated for cause, effective immediately." Charlotte was hyperventilating. "Julian, please, you have to understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, cutting her off. "You thought you were trading up from a poor disabled man to a wealthy, powerful one. The irony is that you were actually trading down. Vincent Blackstone works for me. He always has." Vincent's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is insane. You can't do this. I have contracts. I have rights, which you violated when you used company resources for personal entertainment, and when you engaged in a relationship that created a conflict of interest with a vendor." David replied smoothly. "Miss Greene's company, Grandstone Entertainment, has received over $200,000 in contracts from Blackstone Industries over the past 4 months, contracts that were awarded based on personal favoritism rather than competitive bidding." The room erupted in whispers and shocked murmurs, as the other executives realized the full scope of what had been happening. "Furthermore," I continued, standing up and walking around the table to where Charlotte and Vincent were sitting, "I have recordings of you both discussing the theft of disability funds, making derogatory comments about people with disabilities, and planning to commit additional fraud. Vincent, you specifically referred to me as the invalid and a cripple in recordings that will be submitted as evidence." Charlotte broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. "Julian, please, I'm sorry. I made mistakes, but we can work this out. I still care about you." The pathetic nature of her plea, coming after everything I'd discovered about her true feelings, filled me with disgust rather than pity. "Greene," I said formally, "you forged my signature on legal documents, stole $15,000 in donations meant for my medical care, and committed identity theft to fraudulently obtain disability benefits. You used my accident and disability as props in your scheme to attract another man. The only thing we need to work out is your plea agreement with the district attorney." Vincent was still in denial. "This is all some kind of elaborate revenge fantasy. You can't possibly be Julian Morrison. The Morrison family would never let their heir live like some common." He stopped mid-sentence, as my grandfather walked into the boardroom, flanked by 2 more attorneys and the Morrison Finch security team. "Vincent Blackstone," my grandfather said, his voice carrying the authority of decades in corporate leadership, "you're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. Any attempt to contact my grandson or Miss Greene after today will be considered harassment and handled accordingly." Vincent's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, as he realized that his entire world had just collapsed. The man he'd been mocking as a poor disabled nobody was actually one of the most powerful people in the country, and he'd just insulted, humiliated, and committed crimes against him. Charlotte looked up at me with desperate eyes. "Julian, please, I know I hurt you, but I never meant for it to go this far. Can't we find some way to—" "No," I said simply. "You made your choice when you decided I wasn't good enough for you. You wanted a man with real success, real power, real money. Well, you found him. Unfortunately for you, it was me all along. As security escorted them both from the building, I sat back down at the head of the conference table and looked around at the shocked faces of the Blackstone Industries management team. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, let's discuss the future of this company under new leadership. The woman who had mocked my modest lifestyle was now facing prison time for fraud. The man who had called me a cripple was now unemployed and facing his own legal challenges. And I was exactly where I belonged, in control, and ready to ensure that justice was served. 6 months later, I stood in the penthouse office of Morrison Finch Tower, looking out over the Millbrook Heights skyline. The view from the 52nd floor was spectacular, but what made me smile wasn't the luxury. It was the newspaper headline on my desk. Former Blackstone CEO Vincent Blackstone sentenced to 3 years for corporate fraud and embezzlement. Charlotte had received 18 months for her crimes, plus restitution requirements that would keep her in debt for years. The GoFundMe donations she'd stolen had been returned to donors with interest, and the disability benefits she'd fraudulently claimed were being garnished from her prison wages. But the real justice wasn't in their punishment, it was in how completely their lives had unraveled. Vincent's reputation in the business world was destroyed. No respectable company would hire him after his criminal conviction and the scandal of his affair with a vendor. Charlotte's event planning career was over before it began. Word travels fast in professional circles, especially when fraud is involved. The most satisfying moment had come 3 weeks after the boardroom confrontation. Charlotte had somehow gotten access to a phone and called me, sobbing and begging for mercy. "Julian, please," she pleaded. "I made a terrible mistake. I know you're angry, but we had something real. I still love you. If you drop the charges, we can start over. I'll be the woman you deserve this time." "Charlotte," I'd replied calmly, "you don't love me. You love the idea of my money. If you had known who I really was from the beginning, you never would have looked at Vincent twice. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." She'd hung up in tears, and I hadn't heard from her since. The most important change in my life wasn't about revenge. It was about love. Real love this time. Her name was Dr. Emma Sterling, and she'd been my physical therapist during those crucial early months of recovery. While Charlotte was busy planning her betrayal, Emma had been the one encouraging me through every difficult session, celebrating every small victory, and treating me with genuine respect and kindness. Emma had no idea about my family wealth during our professional relationship, but after everything was revealed, I'd reached out to thank her for her care during my darkest period. That conversation had led to coffee, then dinner, then long walks through Thornfield Hills, where we talked for hours, about everything except money. Emma loved Julian the man, my sense of humor, my determination, my values. She'd fallen for me when I was broken and struggling, not when I was powerful and wealthy. When I told her about Charlotte's betrayal, she'd been furious on my behalf. That woman had no idea what she was throwing away. Emma had said, taking my hand as we sat by the lake on my family's estate, "Your wealth doesn't make you who you are, Julian. Your character does. The way you fought to recover, the way you treated everyone with kindness, even when you were in pain. That's the man I fell in love with." Today marked 1 year since the accident that had changed everything. Emma and I were celebrating our engagement, announced in the society pages, alongside news of my return to the Morrison Finch empire. The ring I'd given her was worth more than Vincent's entire annual salary, but she'd been more excited about the handwritten poem I'd included with the proposal. As I prepared to leave the office for our engagement dinner, my assistant buzzed in. "Mr. Morrison, there's a woman here to see you. She says her name is Charlotte Greene, and that you know her." I sighed. Even from prison apparently, Charlotte was still trying to manipulate her way back into my life. "Send her up," I said. It was time to close this chapter permanently. Charlotte walked into my office 15 minutes later, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, and looking haggard and desperate. The confident, beautiful woman who had mocked my modest lifestyle was gone, replaced by someone who looked defeated and hollow. "Julian," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for seeing me." "You have 5 minutes," I replied, not bothering to stand up from my desk. "I want you to know that I understand now.
I understand what I lost, what I threw away. I was stupid and selfish, and I hurt the one person who truly loved me. If I could take it all back, but you can't, I interrupted. Charlotte, you didn't make a mistake. You revealed who you really were. You looked at a man who had sacrificed his health to save your life, and you decided he wasn't good enough for you, because he didn't make enough money. That's not a mistake, that's your character. She started crying, but I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no pity, just indifference. I have a wonderful life now, I continued, standing up and walking to the window. I'm engaged to a woman who loves me for who I am, not what I can provide. I've reconciled with my family, and I'm building something meaningful with my life. Your betrayal, as painful as it was, led me to genuine happiness. So in a way I should thank you. Charlotte wiped her eyes, and looked at me with a mixture of hope and desperation. Does that mean you can forgive me? Maybe we could. No, I said firmly. We couldn't. You had your chance to love someone unconditionally, and you chose status and money instead. I hope you learn from this experience, and become a better person, but that journey doesn't include me. Security escorted her out, a few minutes later, and I knew it would be the last time I ever saw her. That evening, Emma and I danced to our favorite song in the ballroom of the Morrison Finch estate, surrounded by family and friends, who loved us both. As I held her in my arms, I realized that Charlotte had actually done me a favor. Her betrayal had led me to discover not just my own strength, but also what real love actually looked like. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads you to the best thing that ever could. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.